Afternoon all. Oh boy, was that some sort of trial just to get to the point where you could actually hear me. Well, I hope you can all hear me now. What I was trying to say yesterday, in amongst that Marceau impression that I was doing, was that there were a few things that I wanted to discuss and I wanted to tell people about. I'd started to have conversations about polyrhythms with a number of students and a number of people. It's always interesting to get somebody else's take on exactly how this sort of stuff actually works or doesn't. And really, it's led me to another subject, another topic that I was asked about earlier this week. Now, it all sort of ties in with the idea of playing in polyrhythms. And the basic idea is that as we start to get used to different groupings, it can be quite a challenge. And the more we get familiar with different groupings, the easier it becomes. So this particular chap was talking about playing groups of 7. Now, the thing that I noticed was he was just playing 7s and just getting used to that group, which is great. But the quickest way to get used to them is to put them into some kind of perspective. So it was for that reason that I started chatting to him about linear phrases. Now, linear phrases, as I'm sure a lot of you know, but if some of you don't, it's basically one sound at a time. So when we play, what we're going to do is we're going to play an odd group of notes and an even group of notes. An odd group of notes will finish with 1 bass drum. An even group of notes will finish with 2. When we're talking about 7s, obviously that's an odd group, so it finishes with a single bass drum. Now, when we start to play this, obviously in a bar of 16th notes, if we play 2 groups of 7, then we've got 2 notes left at the end. In order to get familiar with this, what I said was, first and foremost, get familiar with the 7 itself. So it's 6 in the hands and 1 in the foot. And then play a group of 4, which is 2 in the hands and 2 in the foot. Once you get familiar with this, you can then start to think, right, well, to put it in some kind of order, what I think I'll do is I'll play 7 and 7 and 7 and 7 and 4. And that will give me 2 bars of 4/4. And that would sound something like this. Now, in order to actually make it sound a little bit interesting, once you get comfortable with this, it's an exercise. We really want to then start thinking about playing the exercise round the toms. And for that, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to mute the microphone so that you can actually just hear the kit being played. even when you make a mistake, don't stop. I stopped. Okay. It's the biggest thing that we come across as teachers. Somebody will make a mistake and then they'll think, oh, that's terrible. But actually, it's not a big deal. It's really not a big deal. What is useful about it is actually getting past that mistake and starting to get comfortable with the idea that a mistake is not a bad thing. If you're playing with a band and you make a mistake and you stop, everybody will look at you like you're off another planet, because you just don't do that. But when it comes to actually playing and being comfortable with the ideas, really that's what you're expected to do. So now I'm just going to take it a bit quicker and start using the groups of 7 and the group of 4 a little bit faster, and try and come up with something that becomes much more melodic on the toms. So let's do this so you can see my foot as well, and I'll just mute this so you can only hear the click, which was at 70 beats per minute. Now I'm going to take it up to 90. I hope you could see that what I was doing there was actually playing through a number of combinations. I started off just by using the toms in one direction, so it was only the right hand that was actually moving, and then I started to move it in the 7, so it was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and did that in the same direction each time. So it was 4 times doing that, which is much easier to keep track of, because you realise that what you're doing is actually playing, that's 1, that's 2, 3, 4, and then the 4 on the snare and the bass drum, the 2 on each. You start to get familiar with that kind of shape, but you get familiar with the tone as it goes round. So then if you take it back up, then you're getting used to that, and we start to think of the toms as, I believe, the original, what do they call them? The wood blocks, the skulls. I believe that they were used in a very melodic fashion, and that's what you're supposed to do with the toms. So I think in terms of melodies. So once I started to play around with this and actually push them around the toms and feel comfortable with it, it really was a case that I was no longer counting. I was thinking much more in terms of the phrase itself. This is really useful when you start to play in 7s, because, you know, obviously here we're taking a 7 and 7 and 7 and 7 and 4. So it's going across the bar line once. But if you just did 7s over and over until such time as they resolve, now we're into different territory. And really that's where it starts to become really essential that you feel comfortable with the group of 7. But to get there, it's much better to have some kind of concept of how it goes over one bar, how it goes over, in this case, 2 bars. You can then put it over 4 bars. You can do it over 7 bars, and you start to see when it comes back to the 1. One of the big things that I'd like to leave you with today is something that I was taught many moons ago. I went to a teacher, Joel Rothman, who was wonderful. And Joel was great because he got me to read. Now, I'd gotten from not being able to read to being able to sight read in 6 months. I admit I worked really hard, and I bought a lot of his books to actually do this. But the funny thing about it was, at the end of the 6 months, and Joel was saying to me, okay, so what else do you want to learn? I was thinking, well, I still don't feel like I can read. And he said, well, how many books of mine have you finished? I said, well, about 10. And he said, how many are we doing each lesson? I said, well, about 10. He said, well, you're reading every lesson. Surely you understand that you can read. And it then sort of went in, but it didn't really dawn on me that I knew how to read, because I didn't have the trust in myself. You've got to have the trust in yourself. And really that trust, when you know that you're actually learning something positive, will really help your own confidence on so many levels. And it helps you to become that person that you should be, especially behind a drum set. Drums are an indicator. They're a thing that actually indicate to the band where we are. We play the full stops, the commas, the question marks. It's, that's what we're there for, is kind of punctuation. So when you think of that, that actually helps us to gain confidence, that allows us to have this punctuation in our lives too. Now look, I realise that some people might disagree with me, but I really do feel that every time we study something and we make a discipline of it, that it really does become a part of our lives. Anyway, for now, I'd like to leave you with those thoughts. Please let me know what you think about any of these comments that I've made, the ideas that I've actually presented you with. I do hope all of this makes sense. If it doesn't, please leave a message, and I do hope this time that you've actually heard me. It's enough out of me for right now, so I'll look forward to speaking to you in the next few days.